Hello and welcome to this episode of the Natural Clinic Live, and today I am joined by my friend and colleague Karen Downey, who is a counsellor and psychotherapist who specialises in cognitive behavioural therapy. And today we're going to talk about setting boundaries at Christmas. So we kind of have a lot of pressure, particularly in society, to have this picture perfect Christmas where we're all getting along and everything's very Hallmark and Disney, and even the Christmas songs tell us that we should have lovely, wonderful love stories, and it can all feel a little bit pressurized and a little bit too much. So Karen's going to talk to us a little bit about that.
Thank you very much, Claire, and thank you for that lovely introduction. So yes, as you said, the expectation that is around that society has put on us, I suppose, and that the movies and the music also encompasses and backs up with all of that. It's how that sense of overwhelming sensation can come upon us, and discomfort, I suppose, and how we actually deal with that. So, and I suppose the initial recognition of where the expectation is coming in from. Is it the expectation on ourselves? Is it the expectation from others? Or is it an external source, be it TV, be it movies or otherwise, that is actually coming from? So in the instance where the expectation, because this can often be with people that we haven't seen in a very long time, if we're traveling, or if we haven't seen family members, or if family members are coming together that you know might be particularly judgmental, or how that all sits with us. And COVID aside, of not having seen these people, how that would sit in any year of how that would actually, how we'd be faced with that.
And it's an important thing to kind of be aware of, that not everybody has had a fantastic year. Some people are grieving, some people have been ill, some people have had things cancelled that they're upset about. While others just have a family dynamic that isn't, you know, that picture postcard, matching PJs on the couch kind of relationship. Or there might be just that one or two like family members, like an aunt who asks the awkward questions, or, you know, the uncle who drinks too much, or whatever it is.
And it can be a very happy-go-lucky family, that it's our own pressure that we are putting on ourselves of, have we accomplished enough to bring to the table to be able to discuss throughout the year? So while, yes, if it's a toxic environment from the family perspective or friends, we can also bring that toxicity upon ourselves. And it's how we differentiate one with the other. And taking time to reflect that before the event occurs can often be very beneficial. So recognizing whenever the event might be, for example, if it is Christmas Day, if you are going around for dinner, maybe doing a check with yourself beforehand of, okay, well, what have I accomplished? Where am I? Where were my insecurities perhaps last year? Or where was there little things, where did I feel triggered or pulled on? Or are there specific family members that would influence me more than others? And maybe then veering towards those that you're more comfortable with, or realizing, are you in a particular time that you feel that, yeah, I could stand my ground and I could face this other person and I can take them on? Or recognizing, you know what, I'm not in that space right now. I'm a little bit fragile at the moment. And therefore kind of going, okay, well, where are my support structures? Okay, so just recognizing where your supports are, where you yourself are feeling, and how that influences, how that dynamic works.
So Karen, I know that you also work with a lot in the area of women's health, and our cycle changes and it can have a big impact on our mood. And you're just telling me a little bit about how that can influence how we respond and our boundaries as well over Christmas.
Yeah. And Claire, I suppose being aware of where you are in your cycle, you know, and recognizing, is it the week before your period? Is it mid-cycle? Is it around ovulation? And recognizing at those times where your estrogen levels are dropping. And so too often is the case that serotonin also drops. And that being the mood stabilizer, that we might not be up for that confrontational talk at a dinner table, or if we're being triggered more, recognizing before you go in there, okay, you know what, I might be a little bit more sensitive at the moment. And so maybe I need to choose my conversations, or maybe I need to excuse myself from conversations that I think might just put a little bit too much pressure on me today.
And I know it is kind of a cliche, but with Christmas movies, they are set out to trigger us into crying and then having the emotional roller coaster of it all, where is happy ever after or not. And how we feel about that can also be related to our cycle too. If our estrogen levels or progesterone levels are at a certain point, we might be more open to those emotional triggers as well.
Yeah. And I suppose recognizing if you are tracking your cycle, then superb. But if you're not, before you go into that situation, just taking a little check with yourself, kind of going, okay, this isn't a case of somebody saying, she's being hormonal. This is about you being aware of you thinking, okay, it's a biological fact. It's what we deal with, and so encompassing that and recognizing it and being aware of it and working with it instead of pushing it under the carpet and then feeling irritable, then feeling agitated, and that trigger then explodes into even more emotion.
And as you said, it's checking in and saying, is this to do with the cycle of where I am right now, or is this really to do with what they said to you? As well? So it can be
and
both.
It goes back to what you said earlier about what's external, what's internal. The more we know ourselves, the more we can give to others without a trigger of anxiety, without that trigger of that emotional response being heightened.
And one of the other things you pointed out as well is that the end of the month is often a time where a lot of our bills come in, where our financial stress happens. For some people, they will have, purchased all their gifts and will have to pay for all of these additional bills without having had a Christmas bonus or being paid early or any of those things happening.
Yeah. And I suppose in clinic, when I work with people, we would often do a mapping process initially to find out where these triggers are coming, because we put a pressure on ourselves of, why am I being more emotional about this? Why am I being anxious? Why am I low mood? When we start pulling out what feels like a ball of wool in our head, when we start extrapolating bit by bit, pulling it all out, we have those aha moments of, oh yeah, do you know what, now that person visits me once, whenever it might be, once a month, that person pops in. Oh yes, at the end of the month, yeah, there are more bills coming out. Oh yes, you know what, this mapping process is showing that every Sunday night I feel a little bit more etchy. What is going on Monday morning, be it work, be it whatever, that you're not feeling on Monday night? Is it something, are you meeting a specific person on Monday? Is there something triggering? What is it? Is it hormonally related, that it's specific weeks, that there is a pattern there? And so in mapping, in us knowing ourselves, going back to that awareness, that self-awareness, that recognition, there is so much going on a day-to-day. When you start bringing it all down and start mapping it out, it gives us a sense of ease and understanding.
Brilliant.
Together.
So how do we go about putting those boundaries in place in those environments?
Well, I would say that you don't, often when we think of boundaries, we think of a harshness, or we think, oh, but we don't want to bring confrontation to the day. They don't have to be confrontational. It doesn't have to be a fight. If somebody says something and it doesn't sit well with you, you don't have to snap back with a how dare you or otherwise. It can be very gentle. It can be very well, I'm sorry you feel that way. I personally wouldn't agree with that opinion. It can be very gentle. It can be very much, I'm sorry, that doesn't sit well with me. If somebody asks you to do something, it can be a case of, yeah, I'd love to help out, but I just can't do it right now. And recognizing what you feel comfortable with, what you do not feel comfortable with, and where you can put in soft boundaries to be able to stand your ground, and easing that anxiety or easing that sense of discomfort while you're there.
Maybe something like sticking to topics that you feel comfortable with in conversation. Would you count that as one of the boundaries you could set for yourself?
Yeah, that's fantastic. And then on top of that, because the conversation can often go down a rabbit hole of needless that there'll be somebody at the table going, ah, yeah, but. And that's where you pull back and you'll say, okay, I understand where you're going, but that doesn't sit right with me. And where you're pushing a direct line where that person knows, okay, and then they know where they're going, or they know where they're not to go.
Brilliant. So if we do find that we're in a situation where maybe our boundaries aren't being respected and somebody's still encroaching when we've said, I don't feel that's appropriate for me right now, or we've used that kind of softer boundary to try to communicate, or if we feel overwhelmed in that environment, what would be your advice or tips or techniques that you would put in place?
I suppose it would depend on how long you're there for. So it depends on whether you're coming back for a week or a few days, or whether it is a case that you're popping in for an hour or two. And in the case where you're popping in for an hour or two and you start to feel that rage kind of starting to bubble, excuse yourself very nicely from the table and go to the bathroom. And rational thought at that point can be often offline. You don't see it, you just want to blow. That's apply some breathing technique just to start with. Breathe in through your nose for 4 counts, hold your breath for 4 counts, and breathe out for 8 counts. Repeat that 4 or 5 times just to bring yourself back down, just to relax yourself. Then asking yourself rational questions like, how long is this? Will this matter in an hour's time? Will this matter this time tomorrow? Putting a time frame on it so that you can deal with knowing, okay, but I'm going to be out of this situation in whatever period of time it's going to be that this time next week, if you're there for so many days, be that in 2-3 hours if you're there for lunch. Then also asking yourself, okay, is this my insecurity, or is it their insecurity, or is it their stuff, or is it my issue? And recognizing, because it's often not our issue, and how we're responding to others and how others put out how they're actually feeling in order for their sense of security. Okay, so recognizing, is it me or is it them? And taking the ownership. Okay, maybe I am being a little bit sensitive on this. Why? You know what? I don't have time and I'm not going to explore that today, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to explore it tomorrow.
Can you give me some examples of, when it's, say I feel like I'm being triggered, but it's not something that's internal, it's something external versus something that is an internal trigger for me. So if it, like, what's the difference between somebody else triggering me with what they said with their stuff and what they said triggering me with my stuff?
I suppose, and this is just an example, it can often be with, if you go over to a family member's house and you might have children, or if you go over and through COVID or for whatever reason you may have lost a job or you may not be employed, and somebody starts to question you on how your children are behaving, or they start to question you about what way is your career going, or for anybody in college or anybody coming up to leaving cert, or regardless of what age you are, at what stage of life you are, there's a constant question.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time you will see it from when you get in a relationship. Oh, and when are you getting engaged? You get engaged. Oh, and when are you getting married? You get married. And oh, when are you having children? And it's nearly what's next all the time.
Yeah.
So the internal and the external, is that internally bothering you? Is it bothering you that your child might have a moment? Is it bothering you about your career? Is it bothering you about what stage of a relationship you're at? So recognizing that that is all internal versus the external of, is it the aunt or the uncle on the other side of the table, as you mentioned earlier, somebody having an extra drink, or somebody being out of control, somebody just not speaking the way that you feel is that you're comfortable with. Is that their stuff? And are they portraying that on you?
Yeah, because sometimes it can be very divisive, particularly at the moment. There's like there is a kind of a divide, and the language and the conversation can go in ways that are not very constructive, and aren't open to like hearing the other side of the story or hearing the other person's opinion. Or it can be something, as you said, it can be like your job, your relationship, it can be so many different topics that can trigger like something for you. But that's very different to knowing that you're going into a toxic like environment where maybe the relationships have been toxic for a while.
Yeah. And you can often see that in other relationships. You might see that between, it could be parents. It might be going back into an environment where you grew up in, and you might speak to mom and dad separately throughout the year, and then everybody is together, but you see a toxic relationship that has been there for a long time. They may not see it themselves, or certainly they may not express it, whether they see it or not. And mom and dad's expectation might be that, oh, we're all around the dinner table, you know, regardless of if you're 42 or 52, you do not be cheeky to mom and dad, you know.
Yeah. And
that's recognizing that's their stuff. You are the grown adult now, and you do have a voice, and you do have an opinion, and you have every entitlement to have so.
And it can be going back into like accidentally slipping into childhood roles as well. So like, you know, being the older sister who does all the cleaning up, or being the youngest sister whose like opinion isn't listened to, and all of that kind of roles as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, funnily enough, we often revert ourselves back into that. We often accept that. And we often start saying things, and you nearly hear yourself and go, gee, where did that come from? Do you know? And you yourself question yourself then. And that goes back into, okay, so I've spent the last 6 months doing all this work on myself, and now I'm saying stuff that really isn't me at all. And it's, again, it's that trigger of the past, of that is the association, and associating with where we came from and how we would have behaved in the younger years.
So if for any reason we do feel overwhelmed, whether it's, you know, one of the examples that we gave just for illustration, or if it's a much more toxic environment that you're going into, if you feel overwhelmed, what would you advise people do?
Well, as I say, by putting in boundaries, by stepping away from the situation. And I suppose we've spoken about toxic environments here. There are a lot of different, there are also very happy environments where somebody with the best will in the world might have heard that you lost a job, or might have heard of, you know, hard circumstances. And with the best will in the world, they might say, oh, how's it going for you? It might be very sensitive to you, for you to be able to say, thank you very much, but do you know what, do you mind if we don't talk about that today? It can also be where there is obviously a lot this year, a bereavement situation where somebody might genuinely be trying to hold you up and say, you know, I really appreciate where you're coming from this year. I really respect, you must be very upset. And again, just saying, thank you very much. I really do appreciate that. But if you don't mind, maybe not here now, you know, and just taking that ownership of how long you're going to be there again, and what your expectation of your own expectation of that situation is before you go in there.
And is there kind of merit in also maybe setting out some boundaries in advance if you do feel like, you know, you're feeling particularly vulnerable about something yourself, or, you know, if you want to communicate your boundaries? Is that advised?
Oh, I would say 100%, absolutely. And even preempting what you have achieved throughout the year. We'll often hear the negative over the positive. So if you think that it's a situation whereby you will be questioned and you will be judged, prior to going in there, maybe sitting down and making a little list of your own senses of accomplishments and achievements throughout the year. Getting through a year of a pandemic, getting through the year of the lockdowns, getting through the year of sitting down and saying, oh, and if it does happen, that you sit down and say, sure, I have no accomplishments. You look at, from a societal perspective, what you have come through in a pandemic in this year. It's phenomenal, as we all have. So just recognizing that if you're going to that table, that you recognize, but I'm still going there. I'm still speaking to these people. And in order for that to happen, you would have had to have made an effort. You would have had to have reached out, because you wouldn't have got the invitation, right?
Yeah.
Or you wouldn't be turning up.
That's really good to like, just even to kind of sit with yourself and kind of go, I'm actually even turning up. And for that alone, I should be proud of myself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just having that sense of self-confidence lifted before you go into the situation. And as you rightfully said, for those that you want to steer away from, and you know that you're not going to be able to avoid them the entire day, but you keep your niceties, or you try and make sure that you're sitting on the other side of the table or whatever. But even if you're not, that you feel in your own grounding that this is a short period of time, and go up to the bathroom in between if you need to, have a bit of a and then go. Okay.
And if you're going to be there for a few days, would you like advise people like go for walks on their own, or have a friend on speed dial? What kind of
I would make plans. I would, yeah. If it's a situation where you feel that it's going to have a level of toxicity in it, I would have plans. I would have plans, as you say, to meet a friend. I would, even if you say you have to work, or you could, and that you're just getting out of there. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Karen. They were brilliant.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you very much.
And so how can people get in touch with you if they want to find out a little bit more about what you do and about cognitive behavioral therapy?
Through the Natural Clinic website, you can book the appointments through there, or feel free to contact me either on email or on my phone number, which I think is probably available on the site there anyway. And yeah, I'd be more than happy to speak to you prior to a consultation, or to arrange a consultation with you.
Brilliant, thank you. And if anybody wants to message us on Facebook or on Instagram to get in touch with Karen, we can pass on your message there with all of the confidentiality that is required. So thanks, Karen. It was lovely talking today.
My pleasure. Thank you, and Merry Christmas to you all. Enjoy as much as you can, and have a lovely, restful, peaceful time.
Merry Christmas.